And I'll say, when I started this, I anticipated this being easy. I thought this would just solve everything, and I ended up with more questions than I ever dreamed. I start with a disclaimer. Some images and details in this presentation may be graphic. Montgomery, Alabama's first integrated professional baseball team debuts on April 7th of 1954, winning their opening night game 3-2 in dramatic fashion in a 4-hour contest that takes 15 innings in front of a record crowd of over 6,000 fans. Slugger Johnny Davis, hailed as the first black player on a Montgomery team, hits the first home run of the year in the first inning. However, the story of this team is much more than meets the box score. In the months after opening day, the Montgomery team will be thrown into turmoil. People will die, and others will disappear or leave town quickly, sometimes under possible circumstances, leading to many unanswered questions. But in the spring of 1954, Montgomery will integrate its baseball team, and that is undeniable fact. The details have been hidden, buried for decades, in some cases flatly misrepresented, such as in the book Brushing Back Jim Crow by Bruce Adelson, which covers the story of Montgomery's integration in three brief paragraphs that imply strongly there are zero issues or repercussions. Why sweep such an important step forward under the rug? Perhaps because it precedes two embarrassing steps backwards, which it does. But is there something more to hide? While many ball teams parallel their hometown social and economic situations, few are involved in such tumultuous times as Montgomery in the 1950s. Fewer still brave enough to face it head on, as Montgomery tries to do in 1954. The spring of 1954 marks a shift in and around Montgomery. The first black police officers hit their beat, and the very next day, Martin Luther King Jr. takes over as pastor of the Dexter Avenue Memorial Church. A few weeks later, the assassination of Albert Patterson takes place in Phoenix City. Martial law is declared. The incident rocks the state and the nation as teens rock with Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock on the jukebox at Danny's Diner on Madison Avenue. This is the environment of the day. Change has come to Montgomery. The team that would become the 1954 Montgomery Rebels is built, as most are, on the expectation to win and attract as many fans as possible. After World War II, Montgomery fielded some very good teams in the 1940s. The Grays drew well while winning a pennant in their first year back in the Southern League in 1951, yet they began losing money, and by the end of '53, attendance plummeted. Ownership bailed out, leaving the city owing money and the team's status in the league in question. A new ownership group stepped up and took control of the Montgomery club following its bankruptcy. A $30,000 buy-in, which was equal to $350,000 today, was raised, and the Detroit affiliation abruptly ended. Montgomery's new owners decided to go back to being an independent club, signing their own roster of players. It was a popular announcement among fans, who embraced the group's leader, Hoke Vandegrift, to lead them to a title. Hoke Vandegrift was a Montgomery contractor, popular sportsman who built his fortune in the construction business, working his way up from one truck to a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Paving roads and bridges is Hoke Vandegrift's stock and trade. If you drive any Montgomery downtown streets, you enjoy Hoke's crew's grading work. Vandy is free with charitable donations. He's active in civic groups such as Kiwanis. He's well connected among the Montgomery elite at the time of his financial backing of the baseball team. Among his closest associates, Alabama Governor Gordon Persons. Also close to Vandy is Governor Persons' top financial backer and Vandegrift's business partner, David W. Hodo, who was appointed finance director under the governor. To say that Vandegrift is well placed among political players in the state would be accurate, though he seems to avoid politics himself. What Vandy does do is modernize Montgomery, its roads, its bridges, its buses, anywhere there's a need, and often from his own pocket. One of the many ways Vandy helps Montgomery is to bring a modern diner to town, pushing Montgomery into the future by backing Danny Long's restaurant. Long, a Montgomery native and longtime minor leaguer, opens the super modern chrome and stainless steel diner on Madison Avenue, where Burger King now sits. It offers a modern menu and matching decor. It is the city's first burger joint. And the rest, there's Danny's Diner. The others who make up the Montgomery ownership group are a handful of baseball lifers with names like Ernest O'Connor, Ben Goldsman, Truxton Northcutt, these are the men who had been and would continue to be the day-to-day operational bosses for the Montgomery team, no matter who owns the team in name. And as the new owners, led by Vandegrift, are taking control of the Montgomery team, fans are very unhappy with that 90 losses and last place finish. New ownership moves quickly to sever affiliation with the Detroit Tigers, who are unwilling to sign black players, as Vandy states he intends to do. In 1953, fans watched Jacksonville's Hank Aaron dominate, winning the Sally League MVP as one of the league's first black players. Vandegrift knows if the Rebels want to add African-American players to improve the team and attract fans, they will have to do it on their own. When the Tigers affiliation is ended, popular manager Charlie Metro is let go, to the chagrin of some fans and the relief of others. Metro guided the team to its most recent flag, but he's replaced as field manager by Marvin Sparky Olson in January. Yet, while employing Olson was not Vandegrift's first duty as team owner, neither was severing the agreement with Detroit, which did come swiftly, nor was reclaiming that Rebels moniker, with which author David L. Chappelle says in his book on the Montgomery bus boycott, Inside Agitator, is a concession to city leaders for adding black players to the team. While all of these important jobs are on his to-do list, topping that list is a bigger task: rebuild the team, player by player. Along with other members of the front office, Vandy goes on a September scouting trip to the Florida International League playoffs and quickly signs two of the FIL's top players for Montgomery. Johnny Davis' signing is announced in December, hailed as immediately as the first Negro on the Montgomery team. Touted was Davis' Florida International League record-setting year. He had 35 homers, 136 RBIs. He led the league in outfield assists, and he batted .331. Davis is a two-way player, a Negro League stalwart. He's coming off a career year that saw him win the MVP in the Florida International League. His career resume is impressive. He barnstorms with Satchel Paige's All-Stars. He's known for long home runs with the Newark Eagles, where he wins a title. He is a commanding pitcher in Mayaguez, Mexico, where he throws a no-hitter and wins their MVP award as a pitcher, as well as his consistently high batting average with the Homestead Grays, where he earns the nickname Geronimo from Josh Gibson as a nod to his Native American ancestor. George Handy, veteran infielder, played well in the Florida International League playoffs in '53. He earned the praise of scouts and a contract with Class A Montgomery. Handy first suits up with the Memphis Red Sox, then he appears with Connecticut and Quebec before starring in the Florida International League. Handy signs a deal with Montgomery after a contract deal with the Atlanta Crackers fell through. The Crackers' plan was reportedly to bring in Handy as Nat Peoples' roommate while the two men attempted integration of the Southern Association. Much has been discussed about that aborted effort with Atlanta, which occurred alongside the Montgomery integration effort that very same week of 1954. Newspaper reports indicate the Rebels' integration effort is supported by the black population, who vow to turn out to support the team. Black businesses hold a ticket drive to support the Rebels for the very first time. White fans, if they have grudges against the integration, they seem to keep it to themselves, as there's no angry letters to the editor printed and there's no stories of protests. The Alabama Tribune, a black-run paper, describes Montgomery's attitude towards mixed sports at that time as liberal, and fixes blame on the Detroit Tigers affiliation for the Rebels' failure to integrate sooner, which shed much light on the reason why Vandy would want to cut the team loose from the Detroit affiliation. Local newspapers and newspapers and media across the South fully embrace the Rebels' roster integration as a positive step forward, yet they still offer campy news pieces about the first black players in the capital of the Confederacy. One article was drastically edited by the Montgomery papers, cutting out phrases like, quote, "the Sally League brings its desegregated philosophy," end quote. Those terms were likely considered incendiary and replaced with lauded praises for the Rebels team and their progressive efforts, penned by Max Mosley, sports editor for the Advertiser. Municipal Stadium, as Patterson Field was then known, is fairly new in 1954, having been completed in '49. Still, fans are treated to new gates, new bathrooms, new seats, rebuilt playing field, all handled by Vandy and Company. Vandy paves the parking lot, which was considered dusty or muddy, depending on the weather, resurfaces the city streets around the ballpark, and builds an exit to Upper Wetumpka Road to alleviate traffic. Vandy and Company simply do everything they can to bring the team into the modern 1950s. And while newspapers don't give many clues into negative attitudes towards the Rebels' integration, the actions of city managers do. During the summer of 1953, one of the measures the city council takes against Sally League integration is to revoke the license of sale of beer at the ballpark. This is an obvious shot at the ownership, which had stated its future intent to sign black players. The city council animosity becomes even more apparent when the city stops providing help with grounds crew duties. Not to be deterred, the Rebels still field a team in 1954. The players on the 54 Rebels team are mostly new to Montgomery and to the Sally League, with only 4 returning from the last place Grays the previous season. With an average age of 26, most of these guys are veteran minor leaguers, and they're handed a 1-year contract and the hope that a good showing with the Rebels will get them sold to a major league team mid-season. While we are an independent club, we've got a loose working agreement with Detroit, New York, and Cleveland, so we're a top A-level team. It's a short path to the major leagues for Montgomery players. And among the few recognizable names on this roster is Meredith Murray, commonly known as Spud Murray. He is considered the first Yankees regular batting practice pitcher. Starting in 1961, he worked in that role for many, many years. He warms up Roger Maris's bat for the 61 record home run season. Outfielder John Simmons played pro basketball for the Boston Celtics in 46 and 47. Yeah, by and large, this team is made up of veteran minor leaguers around the reliable stars of Davis and Handy. The 54 Rebels infield consists of Lou Schoffel at first base, Ray Cavanaugh at second, Andy Fraser's our shortstop, and Handy will be covering third base. In the outfield, we've got Simmons in center, Lorenzo and Davis in the corners, and the pitching staff is anchored by Lou Lombardo and Spud Murray. The season begins well. On opening day, Johnny Davis slugs the first home run in the first inning of that game that marks the start of integrated pro baseball for Montgomery teams. After winning 5 games to open the season and 11 of their first 13, the club loses 15 of 18. They're streaky. The Reps fall into last place by the end of the first month, in spite of leading the Sally League in hitting, batting average, hits, total bases. But more divisive among the news media is Vandegrift's decision to broadcast all Rebels games on the radio, which baseball pundits tell you that's going to keep fans from showing up at the game if they can get it for free. The game broadcasts are, in fact, so popular that multiple radio stations pay for claims on Rebels games in 54, which runs into a dispute when schedule conflicts arise. The Sally League offers a once-a-week game to a national broadcast that's run on local station WJJJ. And the Rebels, they've got a contract to broadcast all of their home and away games on WAPX. So when the Sally League game comes to Montgomery, the legal knife fight breaks out, and Sally League lawyers, radio representatives are going at it, and the president has to step in. The ultimate decision there was that the WJJJ game of the week was given precedence, and the local broadcast had to run alternate programming, of course. But determined to right the ship, get out of the cellar, the Rebels ride a 14-game win streak to get back to second place. On May the 21st, Vandy hosts the entire team for a fish fry at his sporting lodge on Clanton's Lake Mitchell. Players went fishing and relaxed all afternoon on a Friday before an evening game against Charleston. And then 2 short weeks later, things began to unravel when Rebel star slugger Johnny Davis disappears. After not showing up at a ballpark for a June 4th home game here in Montgomery, it was said that he just left without saying anything to anybody. And following days, it's reported that he may have jumped his contract. Teammate Ray Cavanaugh claims to have gotten a wire from Davis saying he can write his own salary if he comes to join Davis, who's gone to play ball in the West Indies. Davis is not known to have played any baseball following his time in Montgomery. This leaves unanswered questions as to why Davis would leave the team while leading the club in home runs. He's playing well with a productive .263 batting average. He's got 8 homers through 40 games. He's possibly just a phone call away from the big leagues. When Davis resurfaces at his home in Memphis, he retires from baseball completely. A veteran, Davis is 37 years old when he enters his season with Montgomery. He'd married a few years previous. Maybe he just wanted to go home. Or perhaps he was encouraged to leave. There is no mention of Davis ever revealing the reasons for his sudden, swift exit from Montgomery. Bring on the auditions. Following the disappearance of Davis, the Rebels roster operates a revolving door of players trying to fill the gaps. The Montgomery office was willing to try anything, including 47-year-old Louis Likosick, who had literally placed nationwide ads in newspapers. Ball player looking for work, will coach or play. Also added to the roster in late summer of 1954 is 19-year-old Montgomery native Price West. West would go on to Negro League stardom in the following years with the New York Black Yankees after debuting for his hometown Montgomery Rebels. 11 position players would play for the Rebels in under 10 games, essentially mid-season tryouts. 8 pitchers would be given the same short trials and be unable to stick with the team. Attendance is the lifeblood of any baseball team, and Montgomery is no exception. Early in the summer of 1954, newspaper accounts mentioned low attendance, and even in spite of the large increase in support from the black community. Montgomery Advertiser sports editor Max Mosley laments the attendance numbers in multiple editorials over the course of the season, grasping for reasons why fans don't turn out. In July, Mosley, who covers the Rebels diligently, pens a lengthy column extolling the many improvements Vandegrift has made at the ballpark and with the team, and challenges fans to come out and support them. In this column, he prompts Stuart X. Stevenson, former Southeastern League president, former Montgomery team owner, former Montgomery sports writer, to share his opinions, which he does, and promptly torches the Rebels for their radio broadcasting plan, as well as harshly criticizing the signing of black players as ineffectual in bringing in fans, even going so far as naming Handy and Davis individually as failing miserably in drawing fans, though he admits in the letter that the supporters have increased appreciably in number. In his letter, Stuart X. Stevenson directly states that Montgomery's attendance is down from the previous 2 seasons and asserts that the Rebels are unable to draw more than 1,000 fans to any single game. Contemporary box scores do not agree with this assessment, as evidenced by the August 3rd doubleheader against Savannah, which is a Tuesday night double dip attended by 1,500 fans on the night before free admission. Vandy threw open the gate, let everybody come in. And the night before, over 1,500 fans show up on a Tuesday night for a doubleheader. Regardless of the statements by Stevenson and others to the contrary, the Rebels actually drew over 20,000 more fans in 1954 than they had the previous season. BaseballReference.com and other sources agree on the totals, reporting the 54 Rebels attendance averaging about 1,183 a game and 84,000 for the season. While the club won a pennant in 54 in front of a huge number of fans, the following season we taper off in the standings and in the attendance, and then fall hard to last place in 53, dropping to an average of just under 990 per game. The integrated Rebels attendance is a nice rebound and certainly not a failure. Just one rainout from posting the best attendance since the pennant winners. In fact, the 1954 Rebels attendance of 84,000 would not be bested for 25 years. It strongly appears that attendance, while not as high as some would have liked, was not the dramatic problem it was being portrayed as. In fact, it was pretty good, with Montgomery in the middle of the pack in the league and trending upward. The season ends in disappointment, though, with a roster of cast-off rookies and fill-ins. The Rebels of 54 finished the game 4 games under 500, landing in 5th place. It's a disappointing finish to Vandy's first year, leaving some to wonder aloud if the team would even continue. Doubts persist despite a September announcement of a new affiliation with the Red Sox. Hoke Vandegrift, who led the ownership group and their purchase of the team in 1953, covers the Rebels' $26,000 in debt for 1954. He pays another $14,000 that December to buy out the other owners to become sole owner. That sum comes to $40,000. That's the total. That's the equivalent of $450,000 today. On top of the initial investment to land the team after bankruptcy, plus stadium improvements, Hoke Vandegrift has spent the 1954 equivalent of $1 million on the Montgomery Rebels in just a year. That winter, Vandy assured fans baseball was in Montgomery to stay. On January the 1st, 1954, Hoke Vandegrift, along with 3 others, are returning from the Orange Bowl game in Florida when their airplane crashes in Raymer, Alabama. There were no survivors. Along with Vandegrift is pilot Charlie Womack, Miss Dorothy Scott, and Mrs. William Hurst. Miss Scott is a Vandegrift Company employee. Mrs. Hurst, the wife of Montgomery Fire Department Captain Bill Hurst, she is employed at the Montgomery County Probate Office. Witnesses on the ground reported they saw the plane and heard its engine sputter. Mentioned in some articles, witnesses tell of hearing a bang, described as a, quote, pop like a shotgun blast. In all versions of the reports, the plane then begins its fatal nosedive 4 miles south of Montgomery. Newspaper reports state plainly that confusion reigns near the crash site as agencies bicker over who is responsible for the investigation. Neither state nor local police on the scene nor civil air officials were willing to take on the task after the Air Force refused to help investigate the crash of a civilian plane. Even the ambulances took many hours. Drivers first refused to attend to the victims without CAA clearance, then took hours to arrive, claiming to have had trouble on the muddy roads. Bodies of the victims were left in the field for hours as reporters wandered down the muddy road to photograph the crash site while aviation officials and police continued to shirk responsibility. Graphic descriptions of the torn and scattered bodies of the victims accompanied those photos that appeared in newspapers across the country. Identification of the fatalities by Highway Patrol was finally made at 11 p.m., more than 4 hours after officials arrived at the scene of the crash. Ambulance and hearse attendants arrived after midnight, and it was 1 in the morning before the victims' bodies, still in the same position from the crash and soaked from the now pouring rain, are finally pulled from the wreckage. In this era of pre-FAA crash investigations, the Civil Aeronautics Administration is the organization that eventually found itself required to sift through the wreckage. An initial request for CAA support on the crash was denied, leaving the authorities at the site confused as to how to proceed with the investigation. The following day, a Sunday afternoon, the lone CAA investigator spent less than 5 hours on the site and refused comment to reporters. When the official report was issued, it determined the crash to be due to pilot error, citing Charlie Womack as being not certified for commercial instruments. The CAA report also mentions, quote, some pilots, end quote, become confused about which way is up and put the plane into a nosedive, though nowhere in the report does it specifically say that that is the case in this incident. Problems with the CAA investigation are many. The pilot, Charlie Womack's background is solid. Age 50, Charles Womack is a close associate of Hoke Vandegrift and his personal pilot. Womack is a former major in the Civil Air Patrol, president of the Montgomery Aviation Corporation, and head of the Montgomery Aviation Club. He had much experience as a professional air pilot in that very aircraft. Initial reports on the tragedy raised speculation that a storm caused visibility issues. The storm mentioned as being a factor is actually a non-factor, as the rain at the site of the crash happens well after the incident. During a check-in with flight controllers in Dothan, the Dothan Tower didn't warn pilot Charlie Womack of inclement weather because there was none to report, and local weather statements bear that out. The earliest newspaper reports indicate Charlie Womack, the pilot, radioed the Montgomery Airport Tower to inform them he would increase altitude to fly above the rainstorm. Multiple radio conversations are referenced in the early reports, then corrections appear in later reports stating that no radio contact ever took place and that the last contact was with the Dothan Airport. In some articles, including the Birmingham News, they mention the plane had engine trouble in Grady, Alabama. Enter H.S. Foster. The lone CAA investigator to visit the crash site, H.S. Foster, fails to report any issues, either mechanical or structural, found with the plane during the brief time he was on the scene. No mention in his report is made of what may have caused the sputtering engine or possible explosion heard by eyewitnesses. Curiously, in April of 1954, there is a similar plane crash that results in the death of the manager of Montgomery radio station WJJJ, now WGMP, where MLB games are heard daily and Sally League games every Saturday night. Pilot error was also found to be the cause of that crash, determined by the same investigator, H.S. Foster, who spent only a couple hours looking into this fatal accident as well. With the crash in April and the Vandegrift crash on New Year's Day of 1955, there are 2 fatal accidents inside of 8 months, both involving aircraft housed at Montgomery's airport, both involving businesses with very public profiles promoting integrated sports, as WJJJ had been the first to broadcast MLB games in Montgomery and continues to offer MLB games. Other notable crashes in 1954 include a mysterious November crash that kills the former mayor of Clanton, who was piloting his own craft. That fatal crash occurs just 4 months after another Clanton aircraft crash. A July aircraft accident claims the lives of 3 people, including the son of the founder of the Clanton Peach Festival and 2 gospel musicians. Both the mayor and the festival founder's plane were housed at the Clanton airport. Inside of 9 months, there are 4 fatal plane crashes of private planes involving prominent businessmen and political figures who are supporting integrated entertainment, with all 4 planes based in 2 airfields just 45 miles apart, both covered by the same CAA official, H.S. Foster, for inspections and crash investigation. A second investigator is available from Birmingham, but Mr. Foster handles all the fatal investigations himself. In the 12 months previous to the Vandergrift crash accident, there was only 1 reported crash involving a civilian plane in the state of Alabama, resulting in 2 injuries. In the year following the Vandergrift crash, there are 0 private plane crashes in the state of Alabama. In 1951, in Newark, New Jersey, there were 3 plane crashes inside of 2 months that were called an unfathomable event, and it launched federal investigations. The 4 fatal crashes in central Alabama in 1954 by pilot error within 50 miles of each other are an aviation aberration, a statistical anomaly, a freak occurrence of astronomical proportions, or simply deliberate sabotage and successful concealment. My efforts to uncover files on official information on the WJJ and Vandergrift crashes were wholly unsuccessful. In looking for the CAA records currently held by the FAA, they seem to omit the 1954 incident reports from the Montgomery area entirely in a very convenient filing loophole. In all cases, CAA investigator H.S. Foster of Birmingham appears lackluster in his investigations, quick to shuffle blame onto pilots while completely brushing off eyewitness accounts, refusing comments to media, and completing paperwork required to close investigations in short order. More detailed investigation will be required to determine if records exist from flight and repair logs from the Vandergrift and other suspicious crashes of 1954, or if there is any actual evidence of pilot error. The background of H.S. Foster should also be very much in question, as little is publicly known about him or his possible affiliations. In the days following the death of Hoke Vandergrift, the Rebels are sold back to the other members of the ownership group for a total of $1,000, each partner putting in $200 in order to reassume control of the $1 million Montgomery Rebels. The new ownership vows to keep the team in Montgomery just like Vandy wanted. Following his 1 season in Montgomery, manager Marv Olson will be out of baseball. For nearly half of the Montgomery Rebels team of 1954, it would be the last go-around. Among them, Johnny Davis, Bill Ayers, David Anderson, Ray Cavanaugh, Lou Lombardo, Floyd Penfield, Andy Preboy, Walter Rush, Louis Schoffel, and John Simmons, all of them no longer play baseball after enduring 1954. The affiliation with the Red Sox obviously means Montgomery won't be required to field black players in 1955, as the Red Sox are infamously the last major league team to integrate. Following that, in 1956, in order to escape the desegregated Sally League, Montgomery team ownership chooses to join the Southeastern League in mid-season, leaving the highest level of minor league baseball to play in the lower level whites-only circuit. The Montgomery City Council responds by allowing beer sales to start back up at the ballpark. And you can have your grounds crew back too. Well, when the Southeastern League died due to lack of interest in segregated baseball, but still determined not to mix races on the Montgomery Diamond a full decade after Jackie Robinson joined the Dodgers, ownership then joined the all-white Alabama-Florida League in 1957. Attendance drops to under 500 fans a game on average, less than a third of the gate under Vandy, and stays there. Among the lowest levels of all of organized baseball, the Rebels would reside in this league through 1962, when the Alabama-Florida League closed its doors rather than to be forced to integrate. Following 2 seasons with no pro team at all, and more than a full decade after Grant Vandergrift's failed integration effort and suspicious death, Montgomery joined the fully integrated Southern League in 1965. But that's another story.